Greetings, everyone. You're with Norm Schultz, Chalmer Wren, and I'm Nick Urkus. This is the Mile High Sanity Project, and you're in it.
Hello and welcome to the Mile High Sanity Project. I'm Chalmer Wren. I'm here with Norman Schultz.
Hello.
And Ashley Henry.
Hi.
Today we have a very special guest. We have Peter Boghossian. He is a philosophy instructor from Portland State University. His upcoming book is called A Manual for Creating Atheists. It'll be out on November 1st, but it is available on by pre-order on Amazon.com. And the foreword is by Michael Shermer, one of our previous guests. Peter, say hi.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you for being on the show. So we have a fun topic today. We're going to be talking about philosophy and science fiction, particularly in film and television.
I'm actually afraid of how much I know about this subject.
We, too, are afraid of how much you know about this subject.
You know, I got to say that I have a real love-hate relationship with sci-fi. I gravitate toward it. I mean, it's kind of my go-to, and, you know, I have a lot of love for a lot of sci-fi, but I think that my critical mind has made it kind of ruined some sci-fi for me. So I'm finding it difficult to find science fiction now that I can actually suspend my disbelief and enjoy. Are you guys finding that, you know, over time you have a hard time like enjoying some sci-fi because you don't buy the basic premises, etc.?
Not at all.
Is it just me? No, you're okay.
I'm good. Peter?
What would be an example of that?
Oh my God!
Well, you gave me an example before the show, and I think it's good to bring up because I know you're a fan, Peter. Doctor Who, the classic Doctor Who.
That's different. We're not ready to talk about Doctor Who yet. No, I'll give you two recent examples.
Okay.
Elysium and Prometheus.
Okay, haven't seen Elysium yet, so
okay.
Let's not talk about that one.
Oh, spoiler problem.
Yeah, exactly.
I gotcha. Okay, well, I thought Prometheus was a profoundly terrible movie.
In what sense?
I thought that the behavior of the characters was unusually unrealistic.
Yeah. As
well as the general lack of professionalism shown with people who are entrusted with so much technology.
Yeah, that I mean, maybe I'm generalizing, but that isn't really a problem with sci-fi and philosophy. That's a problem with so much of science fiction, and that it's in multiple problems. One, it's just the execution isn't very good.
Yeah.
The people who write this stuff, you know, it just like it could be so much more. Stargate, with the exception of Stargate Universe, could have been so much more. Stargate Atlantis was very episodic. I think Sliders is the paradigmatic example of that. They had the ultimate prop, and what do? It just became something for pre-adolescent boys. It just became something of it was a profound disappointment. But, you know, Prometheus, it had some what could have been some good elements. I didn't think the execution was very good. I didn't think it was profound in any way.
Yeah.
I agree.
And I thought that it was kind of given away a little too soon even. But, yeah, these are storytelling problems, not problems with the basic premise of sci-fi. I actually think that the basic premise of that movie was really interesting, and that made me mad even more so because of how poorly it was executed. Heroes as a show was another example. Yeah,
I mean, the whole idea of suspension of disbelief, to a certain extent, it's like the difference between Babylon 5 and Star Trek, in which in Babylon 5, you know, there's a scarcity problem. They're constantly worried about the station being closed or I don't know. Have you seen Babylon 5?
A little bit.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's one of those shows you have to watch from beginning to end. It's a wonderful show. I'd highly recommend it. It's probably one of my top 5 series. Mm-hmm. Star Trek, there is no scarcity. So the universe is very unrealistic. And it's hard to suspend your disbelief when some of the basics are the basics of economics and the basics of how we conceptualize the world aren't in play.
I don't know if I agree with you on that. I didn't find the lack of scarcity in Star Trek to be not beyond believable because of two things, energy generation and the ability to create food. I mean, as far as power and food go, those are kind of two of the big costs if you're looking at your personal budget, right? If those things become just as readily available as really actually more readily available than any resource we can think of now. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. I think that it makes sense that economy would change to kind of being a non-economy.
No, I think that's a great point. In a sense, they're what Ray Kurzweil and others have called those technologies would be singularities, and it'd be hard to conceptualize what would come after that. I mean, one thing that I think is profound, I was turned on, to this idea by Larry Lessig in Code 2.0, is that there's a relationship between the physics of the universe and the ethics of the universe. Right. So the physics determine the ethics. You know, if you had lived in a world where mind uploading was a possibility, and people have been talking about this on the skeptic circuit lately, then that would be the whole concept of murder wouldn't even make sense. Yeah. You know, and so the interactions that you see and don't get me wrong, I'm a big Star Trek fan. Follow Patrick Stewart on Twitter. Love the show. Love the characters, the characterization. Old Star Trek, new Star Trek, Deep Space Nine, Voyager. Didn't like the first season. Had a really interesting arc. Right. Last season's, but and Enterprise. So I love the reboot. All that was parenthetical, but those things would change fundamentally the engagements of the characters, and you didn't really see that. And to me, that added to the unrealism.
Huh. I see what you mean.
I guess that makes some sense. They had kind of old moral values in the face of their own technology. That didn't
exactly.
Okay.
They're remnants or they're relics of the current system of physics and engineering that we currently have.
How about that?
Well, especially Picard, he almost seems kind of like the virtuist.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh, I'd have to think about that more. Because there are some episodes where he seems downright utilitarian.
True.
But yeah, that's one of the things that they like to do in Star Trek is, especially in The Next Generation, I think they did a pretty good job of making characters that had some multi-dimensional, traits, that they weren't the same all the time.
Well, I suppose it kind of makes sense to use modern ethics within that framework because we can utilize it as it's kind of a social commentary at the same time.
Yeah, a lot of science fiction is a commentary on what's going on.
And some of that suspension of disbelief allows us to explore ethical issues that we ourselves are dealing with.
Right.
Yeah, I guess that. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say District 9 and this new movie that you don't want me to talk about are good examples of science fiction as kind of a vehicle for dealing with modern social issues.
Yeah.
I thought Battlestar Galactica, the new one, was a paradigmatic example of that. Here you have, I think the first episode was titled Water. And so they have scarcity and they're stressed out and they have problems. And at the same time, those are mirroring political and geopolitical realities that we see today, torturing of prisoners in season 3. Yeah. I mean, so you see all this stuff borne out. But again, there's a sort of realism there and engagement with the characters, I think partially because of the economics of scarcity that you don't see in many other shows.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, eventually, wouldn't you agree that Battlestar Galactica kind of turned Caprica into Guantanamo Bay?
Yeah, I think
that,
there were a lot
seemed almost too obvious at the time. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I mean, there were some really interesting episodes and webisodes about suicide bombing, and we think of suicide bombing as very other, but are there some situations in which that would be ethically justified, or torturing prisoners? And I think when it's viewed through the lens of sci-fi, you can do things that you couldn't possibly do in other genres.
Right. Are we planning on talking about your script notes, your info packet on your script?
Think so.
You can talk about anything that makes your heart sing. I'm yours for the hour.
So we don't have to worry about confidentiality as far as talking about this, right?
Nope. Go for it. You can even post it to your site.
Huh.
Post the script. The other thing we just wrote for us.
Huh.
And we'll post that script after about a week before we post the show.
Okay.
So within the next week and a half.
So just a little background on that. My writing partner is Christopher Johnson, who's the co-founder of The Onion. And we wrote about 3 science fiction television series, complete television series, like first 6 episodes of each one. And we wrote 4 movies. So 2 of those were science fiction, and then 2 of those were not sci-fi. So we've written all this stuff, and I don't know. Well, let's talk about it. Let's do it.
Well, first of all, I want to say I liked what I read quite a lot. The story that we're looking at is called Beyond Good and Evil. Pretty big throw to Nietzsche. And a couple of things that I liked about the premise. So, I've always enjoyed science fiction that involves incorporating some unique technology that kind of is a constant prop in the show.
Yeah.
And I really liked the concept of the bag of marbles.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
I did too.
I thought, in fact, when I read that concept, I felt 2 things. One, why the hell haven't I thought of this before? And just for those listening, here's the concept of a bag of marbles.
Yeah.
I'm just going to read this. The cruise ship is structured like a bag of marbles. When one wants to travel to a different room, one calls forth a door, and the 2 rooms are automatically aligned next to each other. There are no corridors or passageways. So, yeah, when I first read that, I thought, no, move the room to you instead of you go to the room.
Sounds like a great idea.
Yeah.
How'd you come up with that idea? Is that something you guys
Truly, just an obscene amount of watching sci-fi TV and movies. Just a grotesque passion that I've had for science fiction my whole life.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So we also wanted to do things that consciously and deliberately broke the mold. We wanted to do things in which the ships right now, they're all conceptualized the same way. So we conceptualized the ship in a little bit of a different way. We wanted to bring together disparate elements that we liked about science fiction that we didn't see being written about or being discussed, like excuse me, like nanotechnology, or like we wanted to import philosophy, this idea of a revolt of values. And we wanted to do something really that just shattered every myth or every show that was out there, and so that's what we came up with. It's also head nods to Blake 7, for example, artificial intelligence and the box, and it gives slight head nod to Charlie Jade. I don't know if you've seen that show, but it gives head nods to some of these shows.
Yeah, I got to the end of the script you sent us, and I was actually disappointed that it ended.
Thanks. I appreciate that. When we wrote that, we didn't write that for anyone else but us. We wrote that as Christopher loves sci-fi. We wrote that, but that was the script that I would want to watch. Like, that was a show. Right. If that were made into a show, I would want to watch that.
It reminded me in some ways, and maybe this is sloppy because I've recently been watching it, but it reminded me a little bit of Farscape.
Oh, wonderful show. Absolutely fantastic show. One of the best sci-fi shows ever. The characterization, the actors, Ben Broder was just fantastic. Their relationship with each other, that was just a phenomenal show.
I have a love-hate relationship with Farscape, so I'm the lone dissenter, even though I'm on board with you guys on this show.
I'm with Peter on this one. Farscape is probably one of my top 3 or 4.
What's your hate about Farscape? What didn't you like about it?
Well, I guess one dislike about the show is somewhat trivial, but and it's kind of unfair, but here it is. An overindulgence of ugly characters. And by ugly, I don't mean just visibly ugly, though that's a problem for me too, where it's just too much ugliness, but just character, as in their moral fiber or their decision make. Too many, and not bad people, just like worthless people. It's hard. I'm not putting this right, but there were just too many people involved in the shows that you knew were not going to actually make smart decisions or care, or there was just too much.
That's not really an obstacle for me.
It's not.
Yeah,
I agree. It's probably trivial. I just didn't care for that. I felt like, if you're traveling around in the universe, you're going to meet some some pretty good people and some confusing people, and you're not going to meet this many kind of evil or just worthless people.
I tried watching it a couple times, and I don't know if it was just too hokey for me, or there's just something I didn't like about it. I couldn't pay attention.
Great. The main character, Ben Browder, I forget the name of the character, but that...
John Crichton.
Oh, he's great.
That whole descent into madness.
Genius. Brilliant. Yeah, and the traveling through the wormhole weapons. I mean, they really did something. The other thing that show did that was really interesting is, like, if you look at the moral path that Scorpius took, and there are no spoilers since the show's been out for so many years, but if you look at the moral path that he took and the moral path that Crace took, so they really almost became inversions of themselves. You saw bad characters who became good. You didn't really see good characters who became bad. And to me, Crichton was he was the kind of the guy that I wanted to be. He was just a good guy. He was kind of an all-American guy. So he had a hero thing going on, but yet he had a humble thing going on. He took things in stride. And all of them were really faced with some, they were always on the run. I think, that's why it could be a little bit too much for people, because they just never caught a break. And I think week after week, that might have beaten one down.
Yeah, especially in the last season. It was mostly Crichton's character just sort of spiraling downward.
I got to tell you guys, I haven't seen the last season.
Okay, we won't talk about it.
And actually, the season before that, I have not seen but maybe one episode. So I'm one thing. I might have my evaluation of the show as premature because I haven't seen those character shifts.
Well, the first season was a bit campy.
Yeah.
The pilot I thought was great. It was a wonderful pilot. The first season was a bit campy, but it wasn't profound in the sense that, well, to use a show we've already talked about, that Babylon 5 was profound, but it was more of to me, it was more of a really interesting experience when you saw how somebody who I identify with, John Crichton, could be you, was placed in this crazy, insane situation, and just what he did. I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was unbelievably well acted. The costumes were great. The sets, the whole conflict between the aliens was just played out so well.
Yep.
Too bad Straczynski, J. Michael, didn't put his hand in writing some of that. That would have even been better.
Yeah.
I loved that episode where they switch bodies.
Oh, see, that had never been done either.
I know, and you kind of wonder why.
Yeah, and the whole...
the scene where Crichton is the girl. I forget her name. He's his own girlfriend. Yeah, he's his own girlfriend.
Yeah.
And he's caught by himself, basically playing with himself because now he's a girl.
Right.
I mean, that just captures. He's absolutely right. That captures like every man's dream of being a woman for an hour. Yeah, and so what do they do in the holograph in Star Trek? You got to be kidding me. They don't have these like crazy sexual orgies. Are you freaking kidding me? 100% with you. 100% with you. And in the future, if you're talking about a technologically and therefore medically advanced future where you eliminate, the threat of STDs. I mean, people are pretty damn sexual now. Do you think they would be less? No, they would be more. So yeah, I'm with you on the somewhat realistic depiction of sexuality in that show.
This goes back to our modern ethics dictating the characters in a futuristic.
Yeah. What reminded me in your script of Farscape was the craft being gelatinous. That's not identical to
Farscape.
Farscape, excuse me. But in Farscape, obviously, they drastically alter the nature of their craft. Yeah. And I thought that was one of the really clever fundamental premises of the show.
Yeah, and a lot of people have toyed around with living ships. There was an episode, I think it was Tin Man in Star Trek Next Generation. I think it was season 4. But people have played with this idea of living ships, and they've played with it, and it's been somewhat effective. Somewhat not effective. But, to get back to your original comment, I think you're right. I mean, I just think that science fiction has been so disappointing in so many senses. It just, I guess if I could sum it up, it could have been so much more.
Right.
Falling Skies, like I I kind of watch science fiction as an obligation, and I just can't believe what a crappy show that is. Like, I can't believe that that's the best that people can produce. And, I'd say things like that to my buddy, and he'd say, yeah, but, all that gush between all that kind of unrealism and, I don't know, happy, whatever it is, I don't know, sentimentality, that's the only reason that shows like that get kept on the air.
Right. I have this running joke with my wife that, we'll be in a movie theater watching the previews or online watching some trailers or something, and it'll be some science fiction film, and from the trailer, it looks bad.
Right.
And the running joke is her turning to me and saying, "You're really sad that you're still going to have to see that, aren't you?" And I'm like, "Yeah,
right.
It makes me mad that I'm going to have to go see that, but I will."
So,
do we even want to talk about the new, J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies? Do we even want to go there? Do we even want to dignify those with talking about them?
How do you feel about those, Peter?
All right, here's what I think. I think that they were trapped between a rock and a hard place, and I think the reboot was an unbelievably good idea. Change the timeline, and then you don't have all the hardcore Trekkies freaking out because you didn't stick to the plot. I just thought it had to do that. What I would love to do is I would love to see that made into a television show. Mm. I mean, that's my hope.
Yeah, I think the premise is really good. The delivery ultimately turned out just to be kind of a almost Star Wars action and space kind of deal.
Like posts the first three Star Wars, you mean? Maybe.
Yeah.
I would buy that.
Yeah.
You mean the really bad parts of Star Wars, the Star Wars series?
Yeah.
Well, this is going to lose me major points, but I hated Star Wars.
The original three?
All of them. I thought they were just uninspired,
even
derivative,
even
uninteresting.
The Empire Strikes Back.
Come again?
Even The Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, I just thought it was the whole. To me, Star Wars has always been something for true sci-fi fans. Don't like Star Wars. It's like science fiction for people who don't like science fiction. Kind of like the analog could possibly be Lost in Space, but not exactly.
Well, I'm not talking to you for 10 minutes now.
I'm with Peter in this one. Star Wars has a special place in my heart because that's what I watched with my mom when I was a little kid. But when I really think about it, it's not. It's not inspired. There's nothing great about it, really.
You know what? I agree with you guys on many of the Star Wars movies, but not The Empire Strikes Back. And, it doesn't carry much weight philosophically, so I almost don't want to emphasize this, but The Empire Strikes Back is, is on lists of consistently, in the top 10 science fiction films of all time.
I find that to be I would love to know what criteria that. I mean, that's like what is Quantum Leap on that list too? I mean,
no,
I find that. I mean, even a show like Alien Nation or something was. I guess it depends on the criteria you invoke, but I just don't see it. Like I loved Fringe. Did you watch Fringe? Fringe was. I
stopped watching Fringe at a certain point because it lost credibility with me.
What season?
Maybe middle of the second. That sounds right. I think middle of the second season I stopped watching it in anger because I loved a lot of it. And I
thought it was well done. I thought that Peter's development was great. I thought that, a lot of people said it jumped the shark with the parallel worlds thing. I thought that was great. I love the unpredictability, how it just took those twists and turns. And, Walter's character was great. You guys like Torchwood? Do you watch that at all?
Oh, I'm a big fan of Torchwood.
I watched the first 2 episodes and ceased that.
Oh, you're kidding me.
Nope.
It's a good show.
Torchwood was great.
They had it had its ups and downs. It had some really interesting. So can I give a spoiler or no?
On Torchwood?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So what totally blew my mind away, and we don't have to talk about Doctor Who if you didn't want to, but when I found out that Captain Jack was the face of Bo.
Yeah. Did they reveal that in Doctor Who or in Torchwood? They
revealed that in the episode when they're in Cardiff by the fountain.
Right.
And Captain Jack said what his name used to be, and I could not believe how well they brought that together.
Yeah, I remember that. That was good.
It was a neat episode.
So I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying it was a neat episode.
I
remember that episode.
Yeah.
Why is that better than revealing that Darth Vader is Luke's father?
Oh, you saw that coming from a million miles away.
Oh,
And
no,
I guess
when that was first aired, no, you didn't.
yeah, when I was like 10. Come on.
No, you didn't.
It's neat because they brought two separate sci-fi shows together.
Who did?
Doctor Who.
Doctor Who.
With Torchwood. Torchwood
Yeah.
is in the Doctor Who
Yeah,
universe.
it's a spin-off.
Yeah.
Oh, that makes sense of why I didn't like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an anagram of Doctor. You don't. So you didn't like Doctor Who? Do you ever watch you like the old stuff? You like The Prisoner?
Oh, The Prisoner. I don't think I ever watched The Prisoner, but I remember it. I think I read about it, or I don't remember exactly. Only that I remember hearing about it. Remind me of what The Prisoner was.
Oh, there's a guy, and they did a remake that was terrible. But basically, there's a guy who quits his job, and he wakes up on some island. He's British, and it's just this bizarre small community in which this guy is in some surrealistic place where they want to get information out of him, but he lives this life. It's really, I would recommend it. It's the final episode was as bizarre and weird as it gets, but it was a really interesting show conceptually.
I will check it out. I remember reading about it recently, but other than that, I don't remember much. Regarding Star Wars, even The Empire Strikes Back, I can understand what you're saying. There's not a whole lot of the thought-provoking science fiction in it.
Meat on the bone.
But I don't know. I think it might be underrated in some ways because Star Wars was so big that some of its plot devices that were thought-provoking have become so common that they're no longer considered thought-provoking. I would say, for example, the way some of that protracted land battle in Empire Strikes Back took place, I thought that was well done. And I think that the idea of the Force, which was not at all clear in the first, but became more clear in the second, I thought that was a good plot device and an interesting one, though I recognize that it's pseudo-spiritual, but it doesn't have to be regarded as that. It could be regarded as simply a part of the natural world that, is part of that universe.
Yeah, that was the explanation in the blood, the mitochondrites or whatever that they gave,
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think that might be underrated from the kind of technical science fiction mind.
Boy, I guess I'm just so negative, down on. Every time I say that, people get down on it. But it was just so, I don't know, it was so derivative and uninspired to me.
Yeah, I'm with Peter on that one. I have a question going back to the script.
Yeah.
So I liked the juxtaposition you had with the valuists and the materialists.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could go a little bit more into that for our listeners.
So we wanted to do something in which the traditional field lines, it kind of harkens back to what we had mentioned before. If the physics of the world are going to be different, then the ethics of the world are going to be different. But the ethics of the world are going to be different in a way that we really can't understand living in this pre-singularity that we're in. We can't, because we, for example, we either have scarcity or we don't have these technologies available to us. So we wanted to change the ethical systems and the values that the characters ascribe to. But we wanted to try to do that in a way that was self-evident or kind of obvious. So we hit on some basic themes in the history of Western intellectual thought, and we ran with them without running crazy with them. So it's a conflict over value. I mean, look, if you can have anything you want, then what do? Like anything is one, as much as you want, your own planet, your own universe, immortality, well, then the only thing that you would have a beef with somebody about would be values. Well, what would those values be, and what would those conflicts look like? I mean, you wouldn't really want to fight anybody because you could have anything you want.
Yeah.
So what would be the purpose? I mean, what would that even look like? So that's what we tried to do.
Makes sense. That's I refer to that as like the hell is other people issue.
Oh, the Sartre thing.
Yeah, which is, I think that this kind of premise could indulge that quite a bit, that really the only thing that matters now is how we treat each other, and there are a lot of things driving people to treat each other poorly. I think that's really interesting. I did have one, I don't know if I want to call it criticism. I don't know if I want to use that strong of a word. More
go
like
for it.
A question.
Go for it. Help us make it better.
Great. And this is a problem with a lot of science fiction. that I'm willing to suspend in order to enjoy the science fiction, but I'd kind of rather not. And it seems to me that, and you say this in your script, that you're trying to do things differently. For example, in this show, there's no faster than light travel. I like that because I'm not. I think that and you tell me if you disagree, but I think if you talk to physicists, astronomers, and you ask them the question, do they think this is ever going to be possible? Many of them will say it might not be. It might be the case that things are just too far, and that all these shows that illustrate space travel are are forever out of our reach. Yeah. So okay, no faster than light travel. And no instantaneous language translation. I like that as well.
Yeah, I do too.
Because I've always thought that that's just a plot device to make things convenient, that it's not actually based in too much realism, especially if you're talking about completely foreign languages that you have no, markers. It's a long process to be able to translate from one language to the other amongst our own species.
Yeah.
And as you and I both know, even when you do that, there's still some information that's lost, which is what makes people want to read things in their original language to get more depth of understanding. So I like that.
Can I pause you on just that?
Yeah.
So, you're right. There'd be no Rosetta Stone of language, but you also couldn't assume that ostension took place in the consciousness, like in the cognitive framework of the entities. So, for example, if I point at something, my dog will sniff my finger.
Yeah.
So you can't learn language like that. Now, the no faster than light travel, you're right. When I was at INR 3, Imagine No Religion 3, I really became friendly with Victor Stenger. I always loved that guy's work. Nothing but good things to say about him and respect. And he said he's not in the business of hypothesizing, but I pushed him on it, and he said no, he doesn't think faster than light travel is possible. Mm-hmm. Okay, so just let's look at that for a second. So what would that mean? We're indoctrinated by virtually every single show that you could think of, Firefly, all these shows. We're indoctrinated into faster than light travel. But what would it mean? I mean, what would it really mean if you lived in a universe in which there was no faster than light travel?
It would mean it takes a really long time to get anywhere.
And
what really long time is not a good word, right? It's not even a fair word. It's way bigger than really long time.
Yep.
So here's my problem. When you eliminate things like instantaneous language translation and faster than light travel, by eliminating those, you're kind of saying to the audience, I'm going to do this from a perspective of realism.
Yeah, exactly.
And here's my issue. In a universe where there's no faster than light travel, it's really fucking difficult to get anywhere.
Yes.
Why would an advanced alien race go to all that trouble just to take over a stupid little planet like ours? I don't think that makes sense.
They wouldn't. They take over. You might have to edit this out because it's kind of a spoiler for the show.
Okay.
They wouldn't, but they would take over vast regions of space. Okay. And not even a vast region of space, like a number so big, like a galaxy in a playground. But they're not interested in individual planets.
But that's still a ridiculously far, a ridiculous amount of distance to travel to do that.
But
and
okay, so
I'm
think about
having
like
trouble
this.
adding up the idea that you're that advanced, and so what's the motivation to do this? Because it's really, really hard, right?
Exactly. So what do you think about it? So what do you do? What does a species do when it's so technologically advanced it can call forth anything? What does it do? Well, I don't know what it would do, but we offered one possibility of what it does. There's a rival species, and they play these games for takeoff. Now, there are these things called von Neumann probes, which is a pretty cool idea. And the basic idea is that, the question I've always asked myself is, why haven't we seen any evidence of, and I don't know if you want to get into this discussion, but it speaks to what you just mentioned. Why haven't we encountered extraterrestrials? I think we've all, even if you don't like sci-fi, you've asked yourself that question. And there are many, many answers. But one answer is, well, why haven't we found von Neumann probes? Why haven't we found – my own answer to that is that I think that there's something about our model of the universe that we have incorrect. Nick Bostrom posits the idea of a great filter. I talk a little bit about this, oddly enough, in my book, A Manual for Creating Atheists. He posits this idea of a great filter and that there are stages that life has to necessarily pass through, and maybe some of those stages are more difficult to pass through than others. But just let's
hang on. I want to go a little slower. So what you're saying is that maybe one of the reasons why we haven't been visited by aliens is because life is incredibly rare.
Or maybe life is in abundance, but not spacefaring life. Maybe it has to pass through some – I mean, look at what we're doing to our planet already.
Right.
So maybe in order to become spacefaring, we have to destroy, maybe sustainability. And there's this thing called the Drake equation. Yep. And part of the Drake equation is – you can list some of the stuff on the webpage if you want to save us time for going over it.
We will.
But – it could be that once you develop nuclear technology, you destroy yourself. Right. Or once you develop – so it could be that there's some kind of filter that filters out life from becoming spacefaring.
Right. Huh.
Well, even
I think I'm a big fan of Occam's razor.
Yeah.
And so I think a simpler explanation is that the reason why we haven't been visited by – other forms of life is because life is actually quite rare, and things are too fucking far away. Simple as that.
Yeah, and that would be that. So that's super interesting to me. So, what are the implications of that philosophically and practically, and how can we capture that on a script? And when you saw the episode guidelines, we tried to throw that in there. Like, what would that mean to go from A to B? Or if someone was, it would alter the very idea of chasing you.
I gotcha. Maybe I didn't word my question all that well because, I'm willing to relinquish it. But let me reword it a little bit. I guess, and I've had this feeling in many other contexts of science fiction. Let's say that a civilization, species, maybe multiple species into a civilization, whatever, they get to the point of being able to do this really, really hard thing, which is to navigate space. Because it's so incredibly far.
Yeah.
I guess I just find it difficult to believe that a civilization that advanced would be so petty as to just want to take over a galaxy for fun. I guess I would feel like they would have advanced socially as well.
Or maybe not. So that's the whole idea of embedding it with values. So what would they do then? It's a great question, and I don't take it as a criticism.
Great.
I take it as, okay, so you have everything you want as much as you want. You live forever. There are some things you can't do. Maybe you can't travel back in time. Maybe you can. But
right.
So what do you do?
I think I would explore the universe, but I wouldn't want to take it over. That seems like making me the equivalent of a constant hockey player. It's all some big competition, and it's about who's the baddest.
Maybe you have these evolutionary impulses that you want to discharge of conquering. Maybe you're bored. Who knows? Maybe it's like the Star Trek episode in the old, I think season 2 Star Trek Next Generation, where everybody they go into, can't remember the name of the episode, forgive me, but they go into these halls where a certain percentage they do simulated strikes,
right?
And they just get vaporized by these machines, and they're fighting this war. Maybe there were evolutionary reasons for this that just carried through, and once they couldn't discharge those evolutionary impulses, they took it to the next level. There could be any one of a number of reasons for that.
What's interesting to me about this conversation is that it kind of reminds me of the way that people think about deities. Omnipotent, all-powerful beings sort of fighting for these sort of petty little victories.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah, I've always thought that doesn't add up. But, I don't know. I'd be willing to suspend my disbelief on that. Maybe having another civilization that was both more morally and socially and technologically advanced as well. Like they did it differently. They actually advanced how they lived and how they interacted with people on top of their technology. They didn't give in to their petty emotions. Maybe having another civilization to juxtapose that. But I don't know.
Or maybe the other civilization was not a civilization at all, but it was the remnants of an artificially constructed entity. The remnants of an AI that took over, and they weren't subject to the same evolutionary pressures, and they developed or had different ambitions.
You know what? I just realized that my criticism here is probably based in my fundamental moral theory that I favor. I'm a contractarian, so I believe that being moral, establishing relationships of cooperation is just the smart thing to do.
Yeah.
And so I've always thought that, it doesn't make sense for these technologically advanced civilizations to not have that idea. I would think that they would have figured it out, that it's better to try to cooperate with other civilizations than to just, run roughshod over them.
Okay, and let me throw this out, and if I'm talking too much, tell me. I get very excited when I talk about science fiction. But the presupposition there is that you live in a universe governed by the current laws of physics and scarcity.
Yeah, that kind of drives social contract, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's one of the fundamental factors.
You take that out, and contractarianism falls.
Huh. I'd have to think about that more. What you're talking about is there's no reason to cooperate anymore. Because
there's no reason to do anything.
No reason to do anything. Huh. I would have to think about that, and maybe that's a sign of a good plot. Something that you have to really give a fair amount of thought.
Definitely.
So I'll concede that. Tentatively. I liked a few other things in your script. I did like what you talked about as far as the changing of their values. Yeah. That's not. I don't know. I guess it fits the idea that if you have the luxury of changing them, you can. Which that is, in my mind, influenced by Nietzsche as well. That Nietzsche's idea of summarizing Christian values and the idea of turn the other cheek. Well, how convenient that you change to this when you're living amongst a people who is oppressing you and you have no real choice.
Yeah.
And so, I liked that part of the theme as well. Yeah. But I've got a list of other. One of the things we thought that we might do is talk about some of our favorite science fiction movies and how they might relate to some of these themes.
Yeah.
And I just got to say right off the bat that my favorite science fiction movie of all time, and probably one of my favorite movies of all time, is Contact.
Interesting.
Because I'm a big fan of Carl Sagan. I think that it is into realism. And I like the overall message of this tension between religion and science. So I'm a big fan of it, for lots of different reasons. What did you think of Contact?
I was disappointed in the whole government conspiracy thing. I thought they could have. I thought they could have done a lot better with it. I thought it was. I liked the book, and I liked. In fact, if I can, after I gave my freedom from religion speech, Dawkins said to me afterwards. So basically, the idea for that was, what would it take for you to believe in God? Right. And I argued that it couldn't be a perception. So nothing, couldn't be that example that I used that Krauss had in his debate with William Lane Craig is if you walk outside and the stars say, I am God, believe in me in different language, couldn't be that. So it had to be something that was divorced from perception. Huh. And Dawkins came up to me afterwards and he said, yeah, it couldn't be a perception, but what if it were something that was contained in the numbers of pi, like something that was spelled out in a very specific sequence or order? And I thought that was interesting because that was the sort of thinking, that was the way that I was thinking about it, something that could be rationally derived.
Right.
Because the arguments that we have for these as God now are not there at all. But yeah, so back to the Contact thing, I think that it certainly was not one of my favorite movies. Yeah.
Huh. Yeah. You didn't when you say the government conspiracy, you mean building the second machine?
Yeah, I just thought this idea of the government keeping something from you, I thought it would have been I like the fact of building the machine, the schematics, the seeing the different worlds. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't seen the movie. I only saw it twice. I haven't seen it in a long time, so I can't really speak to it. But maybe I should rewatch it. It just didn't strike me.
The only government conspiracy I can think of in the movie is them building a second machine, and I loved the way that they covered, they gave you a reason to believe that with the simple line of, the government's philosophy is, why buy one when you can buy two for twice the price? I loved that line. I thought that was awesome.
Yeah.
And I thought that it allowed me to believe that part. But, I can understand not loving that. And there were, I think, a couple of hokey things, but I'm just a big fan of it. Maybe it's partially because of my religious background that I liked the theme of developing the idea that, hey, there might be something that happens that shakes people's religious beliefs, but you know what? Some people will always believe. They will always find a way to twist it to retain their beliefs. So I like that.
So do we want to do us guys next, or do we want to do Peter?
Well, how about you, Peter? What is your favorite science fiction? I know that's a tough question.
It's a film or television show.
You're torturing me.
You have to pick one. There's a gun. There's a gun to your head, and he will shoot you if you don't give and he's got a machine that will tell if you're being honest. So you got to give.
You're killing me.
You got to pick something.
I mean, you're just killing me. I don't know. Equilibrium, maybe.
Oh,
Equilibrium.
That's a good one.
That's one of my favorites.
The Christian Bale movie.
Yeah.
Oh, weird.
Yeah. Although if you ask me in 15 minutes, I may change my mind again. But I really like that you all that pressure with the gun to the head freaked me out. So I just
I just blurted out Equilibrium because I love Christian Bale. No, what did you like about it?
It was different. It was. That movie didn't really have a realism about it. The whole idea. I thought the idea of gun kata was cool. I thought the scene in the end where he just chopped the guy's head in half was fantastic. There wasn't any play in it. I loved the idea of the relationship with his son, and I thought it was. I don't know. I thought to me, good sci-fi always tells a deeper, more profound message. It makes me think about myself, or helps me examine my life, or overtoss a belief, or makes me think about the society in which I'm living. And I thought the message about one's emotional life and the society and the whole idea of getting the books, and I don't know, I just thought it was I thought it was an important film because it was about more than it was about.
I agree. I also kind of like any of these themes that deal with this idea that we can separate the emotional life from the rest of our life. We see this concept with artificial intelligence in a lot of science fiction, the sort of emotionless approach. And it's always been very quizzical to me because it's hard for me to imagine it as really possible.
I think The Matrix does a decent job of bringing that in, especially in the second film, where
great film.
This person, Neo, who is almost mechanical, partially because of the character and partially because of the actor, there's one exception to his kind of mechanistic, almost deterministic style, and that's his relationship with his love. So I like that theme too, and I think that it's important to add it.
Yeah, The Matrix was great. It was a wonderful film.
Peter, have you seen Cold Souls?
Boy, that's Cold Souls. Tell me, what is it?
You've stumped me too.
It's Paul Giamatti. It's a film where you can have your soul extracted from your body. To fix your life. So you have people, they're depressed, they're sad, they're unmotivated.
What the hell?
And so you go into this clinic and they just extract your soul, and then suddenly you feel better, you're fine with everything.
Well, I can't watch
and
this.
And I think in Soul, it's kind of the same idea of your worries, your motivations, the things you're pressured by.
The soul is supposed to be non-physical, so how are you using machines to extract it?
We're not relying on the same laws of physics.
I see. In this universe, the souls are physical.
Yeah.
I had a real problem with that. Was it 3.5 Pounds or something? That Will Smith movie where the soul was supposed to have a weight.
Oh yeah.
That's based on an old not necessarily a myth. It's based on some experiments.
Yes.
Yeah, when someone dies, those have been debunked.
Yeah, that's
horribly performed experiment. I'm big on experimental design, and when I got to the root of those, it's just kind of like, oh my god.
Yes, you're measuring a moving body.
Yeah, it's really interesting that people still latch on to those because almost everyone, myself included, but almost everyone starts with confirmation bias. They start with their belief first, and then they look to the evidence to believe what they're going to say. But then when you start actually asking them questions about this, well, where was the study, or what was the end, the sample size? People don't have any idea.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think people don't understand what would count as a proper scientific trial anyway. And we talked about this in one of our episodes, that it's actually, even if you're a reasonably intelligent critical thinker, it's a little difficult to tell in looking at a paper or a snippet, in the asterisk of an ad or something. It's very difficult to tell if a study's been done properly.
Well, no matter how smart you are, it's very easy to fool yourself. This is, part of what I do for my job is I design experiments.
Yeah.
And I'm constantly presenting to people in a corporate atmosphere the justifications for how we set these things up, and it's very very difficult sometimes.
Yeah. So okay, we
didn't hear Ashley yet. What's your favorite?
We haven't heard Ashley's.
Ashley, what's your favorite?
My favorite is just the one that I can most recently think of. It was just kind of unique and it stood out to me. And I don't really rewatch too many movies more than one time, but this is one that I watched a couple of times, and it's Cabin in the Woods. I don't know.
Are you familiar with this one, Peter?
No.
Well, this was a Joss Whedon thing. It was not very well advertised. But yeah, he took the idea of a kind of a horror flick and turned it into a science fiction film. It starts with a cabin in the woods with the teenagers. And
it starts off really generic. And
very
then
generic,
it just takes a...
Is it really sci-fi?
Or
is it a pseudo-horror film?
It kind of blends because it starts out as this sort of conspiracy with a global organization.
So, Peter, this is a failing of you and I. We have the training in philosophy, and here we've proceeded in a conversation where we haven't really clearly defined our terms.
True.
Yeah, I'm not a horror fan, so I don't really like horror that much.
I don't love it either, but this does bring up an interesting question. What counts as sci-fi?
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to cover.
Boy, I don't really know.
Well, then Ashley wins.
Well, I think obviously there has to be some science or technology that is beyond our current capability as the fundamental part of the premise of the film. I would argue that I might be wrong, but I'll throw that out as an initial definition.
Well, it kind of starts out as a horror film, but in the end, it
does go into a technology.
Two of the people that ended up still being alive, and kind of your thing about the cubes earlier,
right?
From room to room. In the end, they have different cubes of monster creatures. Oh. And in the beginning of the movie, they have them fiddling around with stuff in this basement, and they kind of choose their destiny on how they're going to get killed. So there's different one. There's this jewelry box, and if they would have picked that one, it would have been this little girl ballerina with this shark head, and they show it towards the end of the movie with one of the cubes. And then they figure out that it's some kind of conspiracy. They end up getting inside of the system, and they go up this elevator, and they're stuck in one of the cubes that the monsters
So don't give away too much, because I might want to watch this.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to watch it. It kind of reminds me of the movie The Cube.
So
I was just going to talk about that.
That's a great movie, too. Yeah. But I guess it's really not the beginning, but as it gets towards the end, it kind of reminds me more of a sci-fi movie.
So there's a technology that actually influences how people die.
Yes.
So there's an organization.
Yes.
And this is sci-fi to me.
They have a repository of all the myths and horrors that you've ever seen or imagined.
This is science fiction.
And,
so the beginning doesn't seem like it.
To sort of harvest the fear of... in a very cliche
horror
film way.
Oh, well, this is a variant of that original Star Trek episode where the being lives on the
a little bit
anger and conflict that it finds.
Yeah.
Huh. No?
No,
Ashley's shaking her head. You can't hear that.
It's not the release of fear. I don't know if I want to give away the...
All right, well, let's leave this as a question.
Yeah.
So let's not give this away. I've actually heard a lot of good things about this movie.
It's a good film.
It's very good. It's not. I actually don't really like
I'm not
like
a horror
slasher horror movies.
But it's not that.
But this one's very unique, and it really stood out to me.
Funny, too.
I'm not a big fan of gore for gore's sake, and so I don't like horror
gory.
movies for that reason. But I can withstand a high level of gore if there is a reason for it. My paradigm example for this is Saving Private Ryan. Saving Private Ryan was horribly gory, but that was what really happened. That was the way it really would have looked like. So I felt like, almost like I'm obligated to watch some of this because this is something that's an important part of my history as an American. So I thought that, there's a reason for it, and therefore I can take it. And Aliens is another movie that I think was pretty gory, but I liked the premise, and it didn't highlight or glorify the gore. That would just be what it would be like to have this terrible species hunting you.
It's a good example.
Yeah. So I bought it for that reason. But yeah, there's a fine line for me. There's some violence that I think goes over the top, and that can ruin movies for me. Are you like that, Peter? Do you think that some violence is just, you shouldn't? It's not good for you to see too much.
I guess it just depends on the context. I'd have to know. I guess I'd have to know. I'm not a big fan of violence, but I loved A Clockwork Orange. I thought the violence in that was just perfect.
I've had everybody seems to complain about how that's over the top, ultra violent. I didn't find it to be that bad. Maybe it's because we've pushed the envelope since then so much.
I've seen so much worse.
Yeah, so much worse.
Yeah, I think the violence in that movie served a point, though.
Yeah.
Is it ever okay to take away someone's right to choose, if we even have that? I don't know. But to condition the Ludovico treatment, to condition someone. So I don't know. I mean, I don't think I can make a blanket statement about violence. It depends on the context.
Can you think of an example movie where you thought the violence was over the top and it kind of ruined it for you, or even a movie that you might have walked out or turned off because it was too violent?
Batman, maybe.
Batman.
Which Batman?
The original Batman.
The original Batman.
Really?
Yeah, maybe I should take that back. I don't know. I'm trying to think of if I just see people getting mowed down with a machine gun, or even as I get older, even when I see the bad guys die. Right. I mean, these are people with families. These are people with kids. They're not really bad guys, or they're just guys who probably get paid $10 an hour to watch some cargo ship. They don't know what it has in it, and then they're getting their throat slit and getting. There's something that's just gratuitous about that.
That's making me think of Total Recall, the original. I thought that it might have it for me went over the line in violence a few
God,
times.
I love that film.
It was a great film,
too.
but there were some scenes that I just turned away and didn't want to watch. For me, the memorable scene that I didn't want to watch was when he was in the hospital room and Arnold Schwarzenegger is able to pull the restraints out of his arms.
Yeah.
And he ends up just killing all of the doctors in these gruesome ways.
Yeah.
I just felt like, I don't know that these guys are terrible people. They're doing something kind of that they shouldn't be doing to you, but they're not the ones calling the shots. Do you have to kill them that brutally? I mean, they're not. And it was just so I didn't like that scene.
I think
so. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ashley.
I think the most goriest set of horror movies I've ever seen is Saw.
I can't even.
Definitely
a horrible film series.
I can't
It's
watch
awful.
those.
It's just gratuitous. There's a word for that.
I can't even look at
pointless.
what's going on.
Yeah, well, I think they call it gore porn or something. And it's just terrible.
Yeah,
Anyway.
I can't hang with that.
That one's pretty over the top.
I don't think I've said my favorite yet.
Oh.
So I'm kind of split for different reasons.
You can't be split. There's a gun to your head. You have to pick one.
So if I had to just say hands down, I think that Firefly is probably one of my favorite things ever.
The show, not Serenity, the movie.
Well, it kind of in combination. I guess I don't really think of it
You're
separate.
cheating. Those are two different things.
Serenity is kind of like a longer episode
It's the season
of
finale.
Firefly.
But I think in terms of philosophical content, and maybe Doctor Who has kind of an upper hand here because it has so much content. I'd say Doctor Who is probably up there on one of my favorite things in science fiction that's ever been done.
I stopped listening to you because you're only allowed to give one.
One?
So
right.
I'm counting Firefly.
Let's go with Doctor Who.
Oh,
because it's a
Who.
philosophy of science fiction episode, and I don't know that Firefly is that rich in philosophy. It's more personal character development, I think.
I don't know. I thought that one of the themes that was brought up and done quite well was a critique of utilitarianism.
And what are you talking? In what?
Specifically, Firefly. I would say specifically the film Serenity. I think I consider that a commentary. Great film, absolutely great. Technically great, visually great, great characters, and I thought it was a good commentary on the potential evil of utilitarianism, trying to make people better. That's a classic kind of almost a critique that has been given in ethics courses as a way of considering the ends justifies the means mentality of utilitarianism.
Yeah, I guess I'd agree with that. I think one of the best lines, I think, in film is the line where Reynolds talks about this illusion that they can make people better.
Right.
That reminds me of a movie. I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head, but the whole society has to take these pills so that
that's
they have
Equilibrium.
Oh, that is Equilibrium.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to have to rewatch Equilibrium.
That's a pretty awesome movie.
Some of the gore in Equilibrium I got turned off from. So
you should watch if you like. I love Sci-Fi. It's a little sci-fi film. I'd recommend that too. There were a lot of shows, a lot of TV shows that had potential but didn't do it. Like I'm thinking of. Did you see the 4400?
Yes.
Oh,
yeah, that had potential to be terrific. Yes. I still think Blake 7 is one of the all-time classic shows. Space 1999 was interesting because it was, and one of my favorite bloggers, John Muir, writes about that. It lived in a little bubble that they had. It was just fascinating. Have you seen Lex too?
Oh yeah, I've seen Lex.
Yeah, I've seen Lex.
I got to tell you, I like Lex a lot.
She's sexy.
I was a big fan of Lex quite some time ago. It's an older show.
Yeah,
it was a little campy.
Yeah,
it's totally campy. Earth Final Conflict, terrible show, but it had elements of it that could have been great. Again, I think that, to me, that's a theme of science fiction. Like, wow, it has all these things. Why does it just fall short?
Oh, I know. It's so frustrating. Don't even get me started with the new Star Treks. Because this recent
Logan's
episode,
Run was there, too. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I liked Logan's Run a lot. I thought I'm willing to forego its flaws for the time period. I think Logan's Run didn't fail for me. But the new Star Trek movie, I just make fun of lots of things now based on the idea of, if you hurt yourself too bad, you can just get some of Khan's blood, and that'll fix you right up. Because that was just so over the top ridiculous. I mean, I had the urge of throwing things at the screen at that point.
Have you seen Jeremiah?
I have not, or maybe I have, but I don't remember. Give me a little bit about it.
Underrated, post-apocalyptic. J. Michael Straczynski. It had the guy in there from what's his name from that 90210 show. I'm trying to think of Luke Perry. I think
I know what you're talking about.
I do too.
Yeah, it's on my list. I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, I liked it. I thought it was underrated. I thought some of the things that they did with it were interesting, but again, a little too episodic. But it broke the mold. I think it was written by Straczynski. Recommend that. A lot of the
how about The Quiet Earth?
Pardon me?
How about The Quiet Earth? Have you seen that?
The Quiet Earth. Refresh my memory.
It's post-apocalyptic as well, and it's one of the first films to indulge the idea of. Let's say that human civilization has been completely decimated. You're perhaps the only person surviving.
Yep.
How would you indulge yourself?
I remember this movie.
It's very well done in that respect. It does kind of disappoint a little bit at the end, but I think that's an underrated movie as well.
Interesting.
Going back to Logan's Run, I used to agree with Norm on Logan's Run, and then I read a book by Steven Silverberg, I think his name was, wrote back at the same time as Isaac Asimov, and he wrote a book that was very similar in theme and premise called The World Inside, and it took the idea and it just made it perfect. And then I went back and I tried to watch Logan's Run, and it didn't feel...
It ruined it for you?
It ruined it for me.
Huh.
Because they took the concept of the dystopia and it just made it just right.
Well, that may be something we can talk about next time we talk about this. I'd like to hear about that.
Mm.
Well, I don't know. There are a couple other themes from movies that I think we wanted to mention that I'd like to know if you thought they were hokey or you were willing to accept them. One of the things that Chalmer and I talked about before the episode of bringing up was the being beamed, the teleporter.
Yeah.
Being beamed from one place to another in Star Trek and in other films. What I have written down is, well, this is something that's discussed in The Fly.
Mm.
And I'll just say right now that I think that technology is a non-starter, that it really is the destruction of you, and that no way in hell should you get into that thing. I mean, that's just... It seems obvious to me.
The original Star Trek Bones that refused to step in the teleporter.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've thought about this issue a little bit, and it does kind of... I'm attracted to the idea that, it's annihilation.
Yeah.
And, and the person that comes out of that, everybody else, since we're only looking at behavior, right? I can't know what's going on in your internal experience. I only know you from the behavior that I observe. I would imagine that other people, even people that are terribly close to you, very well might not be able to tell any difference at all. Maybe there isn't actually any difference in how that being would act as compared to you. But it's not the same being.
Well, the person walking out the other end might not even know that they're not you.
Oh, they probably would think that they were you. Absolutely.
This actually ties back into Doctor Who, but I'll bring that up in a minute. What
do you think, Peter? Do you think that that's a non-starter, that theme in science fiction is actually not realistic?
Boy, I don't know. I mean, I guess what you said that frightened me about the whole thing is the person who got beamed would think it was the person who was beamed, and maybe it wasn't.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, maybe we're just too parochial and too myopic in the way that we think about these things because this technology isn't ubiquitous. If it was, we wouldn't even think about it. We'd be like, well, of course it's you. And I guess for all intents and practical purposes, it would be you, except it wouldn't be you. I don't know. I mean, if somehow they knew that it kind of lends itself to the question, what is the you there? But
precisely, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Would I step in it? No, but what if I was in some kind of what if I went through a time machine 800 years in the future? Yeah, probably, and everybody was doing, they're like, oh, dude, don't worry about it. It's all good. I'd probably step in it.
I never even thought about that. That's so creepy.
It's terrible when you think about it.
This concept of the personal experience, the personal identity, anyone could be the sentient me having the same experiences and having no idea they weren't me.
Yeah.
There'd be no way to know.
No.
Because of how personal the human experience is.
Right.
But that actually reminds me of Doctor Who, too, the concept of regenerations.
Right.
You're familiar with that?
Well, in general, but why don't you tell us from scratch?
Well, it brings in the idea is, are we our memories? Are we our experiences? Are we our personality?
Right.
And with Doctor Who, he has this regeneration. It rearranges his brain cells. Right. It rearranges his body. And he comes out with a different personality, but he's still the same doctor.
Huh.
Same memories. He talks about himself as the same person.
I think that's really clever.
And Peter, you're familiar with this, I assume, yeah?
Yeah, I've watched every episode from the beginning in order.
And I never really thought about it, but there was one episode with, not the last Doctor, but the one before David Tennant, where he makes this comment with a sort of hopelessness about him, about this other person running off in his clothes and being the Doctor.
Yeah. And
that's when I kind of thought that's the first time I felt like the Doctor died, when he switched.
Right.
And so I was thinking about it, and it would kind of seem like death.
Well, and I feel like the Doctor is a little different each time he changes into the next person. So I have always kind of felt, if there's a particular Doctor that I liked watching, I'm really bad with actor names. So
David Tennant was what you're thinking of.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden the next one's not as good. It's kind of...
yeah, and it's...
Well, as long as I would argue that as long as there's continuity, as long as there isn't a moment in time where that person is destroyed, So
See, I think we need to go from, I think it was the Dalai Lama who said the soul is like a string through pearls. Mm-hmm. I think we need to move away from that notion of a soul, and we need to look at it at the level of the neuron, at the basic functioning of the brain. Yeah. So there is no soul or essence that's being transferred. There's, and consciousness is just the duplication of those neural states.
Right. So
I think when that shift is made, then to me it becomes a little more creepy.
Yeah, especially it's as though someone's jumped in and stolen your memories and run off with the rest of you.
Yeah.
And you're gone. Which
Exactly.
is kind of how I envision Doctor Who. But at the same time, I think that makes the start, if we go with that idea, it makes the idea of a teleporter a little less creepy.
I still hold my view.
You lose that continuity a little bit, but you...
Well, there's no such thing as losing it a little bit. I would say it's either lost or not. It can be an absolute millisecond, shortest amount of time, that there is a complete separation and that being ceases to exist. It doesn't matter how short it is, that I would say that's now a different being.
But in terms of information theory, nothing's been lost, right? Well, you could invoke the second law of thermodynamics and say that every time you teleport, there's a little bit less you, maybe. But... you break the continuity, but you've replicated the information on the other side, and presumably identical arrangement would produce identical phenomenon.
Right.
Namely you.
Right.
For some reason, this reminds me of the scene in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory where he gets teleported and you see little bits going across the room.
Yeah.
Right, but I just want to be clear. I'm talking about not the phenomena out there in the world for everybody else. I'm talking about a phenomena for me.
Gotcha.
There's got to be a continuous me involved. And I wouldn't call it a soul, but I personally wouldn't go so far as to say that consciousness can be reduced entirely properly to the physical causes of it. I think there's something more, I wouldn't say spiritual.
Like an emergent property.
Yeah, an emergent property. But it's, I'm not sure I can give a exhaustively solid argument for it, but I just...
Yeah, that's the problem. I don't know if there's free will. I don't know. I tend to think there's not, and I tend to think there is no me. I just... Even phrasing it, saying, I just think there is. But Sean Fairclough had a great line. He said, I don't know if there's free will, but I sure as heck is going to... I'm sure going to act like I have it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a pretty good way to think about it. I don't know if there's a me or a person or an entity. I don't know if these moral things. I don't know if my reasoning about these is. But I'm sure as hell going to act in such a way that there is a me, and then I do have free will, and I'm not going to lay on my couch and eat potato chips, which is actually almost exactly what I've done for 5 weeks now.
Well, hey, everything in moderation.
Yeah, well, I finished my book, and then I kind of binged on I have a passion for dark beer. I've discovered a great dark beer. It's called 1050. And
I've seen that.
It's, wow, and that and Trader Joe's salt and vinegar potato chips are the ultimate.
Oh, so I'm going to throw a movie out there. And we could talk about this subject forever.
Yeah, just so if ever you want to end the conversation, Peter, just let us know. We don't know what your schedule is. Or
when it comes to science fiction, I could literally talk about science fiction. I seriously, all anybody ever wants to talk to me about is the faith virus and helping people out of there. And I'm just, I literally do that for like 18 hours a day now, and it's just gotten to a point where I need a break from it sometimes.
I understand.
And again, as I said, I start to feel guilty if a day goes by where I haven't helped somebody overcome their faith, and so it's good for me to take a break and talk. I mean, my real passion, frankly, is not science fiction movies; it's science fiction television.
Oh, I see.
And I'm with Peter on that one.
I see.
And the reason is because this is going to maybe sound a little weird, but I get so disappointed when movies are over. Yeah. They're just too short from, I really get into them. So I almost try not to watch them that much anymore. Like I saw the one with Tom Cruise. Was it Oblivion?
Yes.
Oh, that was disappointing.
See, I thought that was a twist that I didn't expect.
You liked that film?
I wouldn't say liked. I'd say it entertained me.
Okay.
I'd say that it was an interesting twist. It had some good use of technologies. It was entertaining to me. I wouldn't say I liked it.
Okay.
But I get kind of sucked into the universes, like just I don't know. I guess it's a vehicle for me to discharge my creativity. I have no creative outlets in my life.
Right.
So I enjoy science fiction TV shows because you get to see people grow and develop in relationships. It's not just like an hour and a half.
I get that.
I think, I agree completely. And I think one of the reasons Firefly is maybe so popular is because it just wasn't quite enough. If there had been 3 seasons, maybe I think people would be actually a little less crazy about it.
Maybe.
You'd get your fill, but there's this whole universe of interesting stuff that nobody ever got to see, and I think that's just sort of nags in the back of your head.
Depends on how it was done.
Yeah.
Because, there were, I think 3 seasons of the original Star Trek.
Yeah.
And it became just a cult phenomena after that. So, but, I agree with what you're saying, yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know if the whole 3 seasons of the original Star Trek are necessarily seeds for the cult phenomenon. I would say that a portion of it has really seeded it. There was a fair amount of time there where it was a creature feature kind of thing and kind of lost its roots. But yeah,
I can understand. Yeah. I don't know. I like science fiction movies perhaps a little better. Some of it for simplistic reasons, like I feel like they have better budgets so they can actually, do more things and be a little more professional in their production, etc. And I love the act of going out to the movies to go, get out of my comfortable area and have a night out and think about something completely different. Where I actually feel like the physical space of being in my house watching a TV show doesn't allow me to get away from it as much mentally because of not being able to get away from my house. So I don't know. Those are kind of mundane reasons why I like films, but probably one of the best examples for me of really a film that really took me away was Avatar. I mean, when you see that in 3D, the way it was supposed to be watched, and that's probably one of the few films I think that really, in order to see it properly, you have to see it in 3D. I felt like when the movie was over, it took me probably an hour or two to readjust to life in the world, And I loved that. I thought that was escapism at its best. And I guess I do like science fiction for the escapists property.
Unless it's Star Trek.
The
newer Star Trek.
Oh, God,
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah, and it's funny how some things manage to capture that so well.
Yeah.
And some I just simply could not believe how bad Andromeda was. I mean, I remember reading, I think it was in Sci-Fi's flagship magazine, that this was the best ranked show on television. And I remember thinking to myself, you've got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
I mean, you've just got to be kidding me.
Yeah, I found it unwatchable.
It was unwatchable. I watched it anyway, but it was it was totally unwatchable. It's one of those things that you minimize in a small window in your computer while you answer emails.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I do that on some shows, yeah.
Eureka was a quirky show.
I liked Eureka.
Could have been more. I'm very disappointed. Seasons. I don't know. The whole sheriff being dumb thing kind of got old. I don't know. The characters had a nice relationship and it was well acted. But it just lacked something. I like the quirkiness. I like the earlier seasons better, but it lacked something.
I've often said that movies in general, but I think science fiction movies perhaps more than others, they need to hire some philosophers because they need someone to look at the believability and question some of the assumptions, and they need someone to, actually help them to convince the reader and respect the reader's the watcher's intelligence more. And I think that philosophers would be particularly good at that, at doing that, if they were actually participated in some of the writing and development of the film.
How about this? I'll do one better. How about they buy my script?
Yeah, we're about to make a similar comment.
Yeah, of course, then there's the whole problem of if you would retain control over it, etc. And
yeah, so. I think and again, that's always the problem. I don't know enough about how to actually bring it from script to production, so it's probably good if I didn't have that. But a great example of a show that I of a movie I liked that became somewhat of a cult classic that was just unbelievably hard to understand, but there was something really profound there. I had to watch it a few times. It was Primer.
I have that on my list. Yep.
Yeah, man, that is a absolutely positively must-watch show.
Yeah, it's a great movie. It's so much that really the science fiction is almost entirely based in conversation. Right?
It's a genius show. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind was good.
Yeah.
Back to Primer. So that show was. I mean that movie was so complicated. Like I watched it a few times and I had to cheat and I looked up on I think Wikipedia or someplace
I
and I looked at
thing.
I looked at the timelines. Another show that was great that I just thought of was I think it's Daybreak. Have you seen it?
No.
Totally underrated show. One of the most underrated shows in network shows.
Show?
Surprisingly not.
Okay.
It's about a guy.
We did watch it.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we did watch it. Yeah, and it was great, but it was canceled, wasn't it?
Yeah, after one season, it was like he lives in like a Bill Murray Daybreak state, Groundhog Day state.
Yes.
Wonderful show.
Yeah, that is a great show. I was sad to see it canceled. That was a great show. What did you think of Taken?
Refresh my memory.
That's a film indulging the premise of the people who are abducted by aliens.
I don't think I saw it.
Oh, really?
I remember it being on. I never saw it.
It's very well done.
Is it?
It's not as hokey, not nearly as hokey as you think. It's very well acted. Had a decent budget, and kind of show that is absorbing. Like, it really does a good job of making you want to see the next episode.
Speaking of back to Primer, speaking of time travel stuff, have either of you guys ever seen La Jetée? It's an old black and white French film.
Now you're just showing off.
No. Well, have you
like
seen,
I watched a French film.
Have you
Look
seen
at me, I'm
12
chilling.
Monkeys?
Yeah, of course.
Of course.
It's based on that.
Yeah, it was based on this old French movie La Jetée.
I just read today the Sci-Fi channel is going to adopt that to a show. Have you seen Frequently Asked Questions About Time Travel? I think that's the name of it.
It sounds really familiar, but I haven't seen
Boy,
it.
that was fantastic. That was like the sleeper hit.
What the heck?
This is a show?
A movie.
Movie. Oh, I have not seen that. Who's in it?
Nobody I can remember.
Okay.
That's probably good.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. About the time travel issue, I have a love-hate relationship with the time travel issue as well. As I got to a point where literally I was like, okay, no more movies about time travel. Because I'm sick of that plot device. And then I broke my own rule and saw the very good recent movie about time travel, which was with Bruce Willis and that other... why am I forgetting them? It's not... Is it Jumper? Were you talking? No, it's not Jumper.
It's...
Looper.
That's right.
Looper was great.
That was a great movie.
Was
that was
fantastic.
probably the best science fiction movie of the recent past year, maybe.
God, Looper was wonderful.
And I was willing to forego my no time travel for that movie. But I think it's an overused plot device. And it does have this fundamental problem of, reverse time travel being the kind of more interesting of the directional time travel. And, it's my understanding that, physicists and astronomers, those kinds of folks will tell you that it's not clear that that's ever possible either. There might be that the universe makes it impossible to go back in time because somehow this is a way of keeping continuity, almost.
Speaking of which, have you guys seen Continuum?
Yeah, I was actually about to bring up Continuum in terms of films that use it as a plot device. Or
Right.
shows, I should say.
Right.
I enjoyed Continuum. I don't know. I like time travel as a plot device, especially when you take something from the future and bring it back.
Yeah, I like that, and I think it was in. I love this idea when, like in Babylon 5, the Chrysalis, I think, is name comes from nothing. It was taken from the past, but it was. So time travel, I like parallel universes a lot, like Charlie Jade. I find that fascinating. I really love deep space sci-fi, and there's just none of it on. There hasn't been. So deep space, alternative universes, time travel, the lesser. So what was that show that was just on? God, I feel bad. I forgot the name of it. Post-apocalyptic guys, Defiance. You seen that?
Yeah, I've heard of it.
I have not seen it. It's on my list of things to see.
It's on my list, yeah.
Which is now growing because we have you on an episode.
Yeah, I have like 6 things now I have to watch.
Yeah.
Yeah, the pilot of that is great, and then it went downhill pretty quickly. But one of the reasons that I thought it had such potential is it does something different. The plants have a different look. The sky has a different look. It tries to imagine a world that's fundamentally different, but it does so. At least the pilot was wonderful, and then it kind of became maybe not hokey, but mundane or
I don't know.
It didn't take any risks. Yeah.
I just realized that I've seen it, and I had the exact same reaction as you. The pilot was great, and then after that, it quickly fizzled.
Well, it brings up, I think aesthetics in television, science fiction television, can make a huge difference. Not necessarily hokey versus high budget, but one of my favorite things about Firefly and Farscape is the aesthetics. I love the way it looks and the way it feels.
Farscape is totally that way.
Yeah.
I have to say Stargate Universe is that way too.
Yeah, I agree. And not all the Stargates were like that.
I think the aesthetics of the modern Battlestar Galactica were better than those.
Awesome.
Yeah, they're very good.
Yeah.
Just awesome. Here was something that was terrible. Like the aesthetics in the Sarah Chronicles were bad. The aesthetics in V were terrible. The aesthetics in Space Above and Beyond could have been so much better, but weren't.
How about Alien Nation? That was not aesthetically a very good.
No.
It was a great plot. Great plot devices, good character development, but not very good visuals.
Yeah. Did you? I love. So it's so interesting to me when I watch older sci-fi, and I got into this phase when in Portland here there's a little store, Movie Madness on Belmont. I used to rent all their old sci-fi shows, sci-fi movies, and it's just so interesting what science fiction predicted was just spot on and what wasn't spot on.
Yeah.
What was, they have these crazy technologies where they're going into space, but they hold big radios. So,
right.
or they have headsets with these really thick things, or they totally miss the role of gender or racial relationships in the future.
Right.
But they focused on, so to me, a good sci-fi show means that it's a great show that happens to be set in sci-fi.
Right.
And so many of the shows, I think the people who write these things just aren't sci-fi fans. I really think that. I don't mean to be overly harsh. I think they're very good writers for the most part, and they're trying to satisfy an audience primarily of 13-year-old boys, which makes it a little different. But I think that it's really missing something fundamental in so many of the shows, and the Sci-Fi Channel has been nothing but a disappointment.
Yes.
Yeah, well, and you and I talked about this a little bit on the phone, Peter, is what's going on with this market for smart science fiction that really pulls into these elements of things that are more profound, philosophical, interesting, and ethical with good characters.
Believable. You know?
And I'm like you. I'm a little confused as to why it's not more popular, because I go to these science fiction conventions and these pop culture conventions, and I see people that are just absolutely crazy about all the same things I am.
Yeah.
Crazier.
Yeah.
And you talk to them, and they're as into it as any of us are. They're not like, I like all the gunfights in that show.
Right.
And so I'm a little befuddled as to why this market hasn't developed a little bit better. It's there. You have to go looking for it.
There are going to be people who take advantage of the fact that this is a real vacuum in the market and produce something that's really good, and it's going to that I'm looking forward to that.
Okay, listen up. If you're a science fiction producer and listen up. Here's what people want. Let me tell you what they want.
Precisely.
They want things where they can realistically suspend their believability.
Yeah.
They want things that we've learned a lot of lessons from Battlestar Galactica. We like the camera angles. We like the intense characterization. We like the grittiness. But we don't want things that are too derivative of that. People who like sci-fi tend to stay up late at night. They tend to be night owls. So they have certain characteristics. They're thoughtful people. They're fairly knowledgeable people, but they like ideas that titillate them. They like ideas that they can have some ownership in. but they like to see characters they care about, just like any other genre. Right. They like to see characters they care about, and they like to see people, the best come out of people when they're placed in extraordinarily bad circumstances. Right. But they like things that are philosophically interesting, but just don't grind them down to make it too intellectually burdensome.
Not preachy.
And they don't like freaking the same stupid monsters in the sci-fi movies that I stopped watching years ago. You know, like the new thing, show the monster, like, you know, people in a cabin. And I understand they do that because it's shot cheap, or they're in Antarctica and there's no way out. It's a frozen. Like, I got that. But you can do the same thing. We don't want a show in which everybody is running from aliens in a ship anymore, with all the corridors are shot in one corridor.
Right.
Been there, done that.
Yeah, we're through.
You know, I would love to see a film that or a show that just illustrates how easy it is to destroy something in space. Just that. I don't think I've seen it. You know, even on Battlestar Galactica, which I loved, you know, they have these advanced technologies, but they still have weapons that don't track.
Yeah.
Simple little things like that. Like, okay, this is a physics problem. This ship is traveling from this direction to this direction and not moving abruptly. It should be incredibly easy to shoot that out of the sky. What is taking so long?
Even guns, like there was an episode of Enterprise in which the gun shot behind them, the bullets went behind them and then launched back again. You know, like even they look, listen up, producers. You need to conceptualize things differently, because that's going to make you money, because people want to see things that are different. They don't want to see the same old tired storylines. And there's some really interesting stuff that can be done that's just not being taken advantage of. And for the life of me, I cannot figure out why. It wouldn't cost more. The special effects would be minimal, but just some of these ideas, people haven't tapped into that yet. And I don't have an answer to why that is.
I cannot tell you how many times I have left a movie and in the anger of being disappointed at the money and 2 hours that you just spent, I kind of almost yell in the parking lot, it doesn't cost any more money to make sense.
Yeah.
It doesn't. It costs the same amount. It's not going to change the scene other than, you know, things that don't cost money. So, yeah.
And if I can add one last gripe, I think it has to do with characters. Making relatable characters that you can believe in and like. I think a lot of the characters made today are meant to relate to kids or teenagers, or this sort of adolescent
simplistic
fantasy,
caricatures,
masculine fantasy, you know, caricatures. And the most popular characters, the ones that have really been inspiring, are the ones that remind us of our own sort of ethical dilemmas and complexities and our own problems, rather than this stupid fantasy of self-idealization.
Right. And what is it with these women not having sex? Like Samantha Carter never had a boyfriend with almost, you know, she got one, and I mean they're just portrayed as non-sexual beings, and it's just not realistic. Like, can't they throw in some realism where they have one night stand? What do you think, going to alienate people? That's why, by the way, I was blown away by the scene in Continuum where the protagonist sleeps with the guy who's a scum when she feels vulnerable.
Yeah, I remember.
Like that, that was floored me. I was just completely blown away by that. And I was blown away by that because the instant I saw that, I've been so frenzied with my book and everything lately, I haven't really had enough time. And I looked and I said, this cannot be made in the U.S.
Yeah, it's Canadian, right?
Yeah, it is. It's shot in Vancouver, but it cannot be. And you know, even that scene where she was in the bathroom and she's talking to the boss who's next door to her, and there's no toilet paper, and she's like, I had one of these days, and her boss says, oh, you need toilet paper. They don't show that humanness, that sexuality, particularly among females in these shows. And I just think that's really interesting. I mean, I think it's a homogenization or sterilization of, but not the female form, mind you, which is really interesting. So they'll portray women in a sexual way, but they won't actually portray them as sexual. Like, yeah.
Yeah, it's very it seems like the market is still centered on men. Adolescent, kind of.
Perhaps.
Adolescent. And then, you know, we still haven't come to grips with the whole race thing yet. And so the role of race in these shows is really interesting as well. Yeah.
Well, you know, let's save that. I'm going to say, and I hope it does happen, that we'll do another episode on science fiction and philosophy and invite you back to the show. And we'll talk about some things that we haven't talked about
We've narrowed
today.
the conversation a little bit.
Yeah, maybe we'll talk about some specific sub-themes in a handful of movies or TV shows, and maybe speculate on what would make for a good new show as well. So I just want to say I've enjoyed this a lot. I think this is a great place to leave the episode. Chalmer, are you happy?
I think so. Peter, thank you a lot for being on the show. We had a great time with you.
My pleasure. I appreciate it, and it was a lot of fun for me, and I really like the fact that it was just an honest, sincere conversation, and I thank you guys. Thank everyone for that.
We didn't ask you about God.
No, that's next episode.
Do you have a few minutes to take for Jesus Christ?
It's too bad you couldn't see me, but I'm raising my finger like I'm going to say yes, and I'm getting excited. Then I say no.
All right, we'll put in the end theme music here. Great, nice job, everybody. And Peter, it was great to meet you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And if you could let me know if that comes out, and I'll tweet it and promote it on my website or on my Twitter and Facebook. And again, I really do appreciate it. Thank you so much. It was really kind of you guys to have me on. It was a very fun chat.